Let me know if you hear my husband in the background.
Will do.
Do you hear me?
Very quietly. It's not over.
Yeah.
Let me know if you hear my husband in the background.
Will do.
Do you hear me?
Not right now.
Okay, I just want to give an update that the YouTube live stream is going. I'm checking it now.
Do you guys have an echo? Does anyone have an echo? I just muted the live stream, so everything should be fine from here on out, hopefully, but I thought I was hearing an echo a second ago.
I do
I'm
not
gonna go
hear
ahead
one.
and start letting people in and then just mute folks as they come in. If that's all right, or do you want to wait till 6:30?
No, go ahead. That sounds good.
Okay, cool.
Hi, everyone. Hope you guys are doing well tonight. We're going to get started in just a moment. We're going to give everyone maybe like 2 or 3 minutes to join. Talia, it's good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Long time no see.
It's been like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, it's been a minute. How have you been doing?
Pretty good. How about you?
Doing well. Have a baby now. He's a year old.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really fun age right now.
All right, it seems like it's slowed down as far as folks joining, but I can continue to monitor and let folks in as we're going.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm just going to do a quick background and introduce our coalition space. Make sure I have the right presentation. So many Zoom controls. Okay. So thanks so much for everyone for being here. I'm so happy to see so many familiar names and faces from 2021. glad to see that you guys are still following along. We weren't expecting to be back here so soon, but thanks for being here and thanks for taking time to help out. So we are the Fair Maps Texas Coalition. Our coalition started back in 2017. We are basically a collection of nonpartisan nonprofit groups. Some of the original groups are up on the screen. So we have Common Cause Texas, League of Women Voters Texas, Texas Civil Rights Project, Clean Elections Texas, Texans Against Gerrymandering, and ACLU of Texas. These are the core members of the coalition. And we are looking to expand the coalition in the future, though. So if your organization is interested and you're nonpartisan, please feel free to reach out to us so we can add and grow the coalition and add more voices to the conversation and more seats at the table. Okay. Because it's John Lewis Remembrance Day, we wanted to make sure to talk about that. And I found a quote from him that's very fitting for this moment. It seems like the state keeps taking away more representation and more civil rights and more voting power for many communities across the state. This quote from John Lewis is very fitting for this moment. The fight that we're in has been a very long fight for decades and decades and decades. The state has discriminated against voters of color for the past 50 years, every single decade. So this is not new. This new attempt is very brazen, though. So let me just read the quote from John Lewis. Take a long, hard look down the road you will have to travel. And of course, Zoom is going to screw my view up. Hold on just 1 second. I'm sorry. Are you guys seeing still the slides, or are you seeing the Zoom screen?
We were seeing the slides, but now I just see your desktop and it says click to exit full screen.
Let me try this again. Let me read it now while I can see it. Sorry about that. Take a long, hard look down the road you will have to travel once you have made a commitment to work for change. Know that this transformation will not happen right away. Change often takes time. It rarely happens at all at once. In the movement, we didn't know how history would play itself out. When we were getting arrested and waiting in jail or standing in unmovable lines on the courthouse steps, we didn't know what would happen, but we knew it had to happen. And I know the fight that we're in seems very long and arduous, but I'm glad that everyone's here and I'm glad we're in this fight together. Before we start, I have action items for everyone. The purpose of tonight's town hall is to mobilize folks. We're not going to sit here. Literally, we're not going to sit here and take this sitting down. We are going to fight back. We're going to raise our voices. We're going to stand up. We're going to speak out. We're going to sit down if we have to. We're going to organize the sit down if we have to. Nonviolent action up at the Capitol. But for tonight's action items, we want folks to start thinking about preparing testimony to present to the legislator. There is a real possibility that we might not be given the chance to provide testimony, though. In 2011, the state did not hold public field hearings across the state. They didn't include the public in the redistricting process. So if that's the case, we need to be ready for that. And so our backup plan is to have folks mobilize members of the community. And by members of the community, I mean your local elected officials. So as of this morning, the Fair Maps Texas Coalition and 31 community organizations sent a letter to the governor asking the governor to withdraw redistricting from the upcoming special session that's starting July 21st. We want you guys to take that letter to your local elected officials. This idea has come from what happened recently in Tarrant County with their mid-census redistricting. I don't know if anyone was keeping track of that, but one of the items that we remember, one of the actions that we remember that really was very effective at having the community speak out is when a whole collection of local mayors from Tarrant County sent a letter to the county speaking out against what the county was doing, calling out concerns of racial discrimination in the county's process, asking them not to do it and hold off on it. So we would like you guys to take the letter that we sent to the governor and alert your local city council members, county commissioners, so on and so forth, and see if you can get them to raise their voice, to speak out against what the state is trying to do. For the next part of the talk, we are going to switch over and give you guys background and update. Veronica Worms from the Texas Civil Rights Project will be going through that. Then we're going to switch back just briefly to me. We're going to talk a little bit about the harms of gerrymandering and what this means for you and your family. And then we're going to pass it over to Nikki from Engage. Nikki, please forgive me. I can't remember your last name, Nikki Hafizi, right?
I know where Stephanie, yes.
Thank you. Okay. So Nikki is going to be taking over and talking about policy impacts as well. But as of right now, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Veronica. She's going to be sharing some background and update with everyone.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Steph. Just want to make sure are folks seeing the PowerPoint? Did I get a thumbs up? All right, fantastic. Okay, so this is
3 different screens. So I think you need to click on the PowerPoint.
Apologies.
Or
one moment.
Maximize it. Yeah, so we see the screen, the notes, and then the slideshow, and then Slack. So
Okay, one moment. Apologies, everyone. All right, let's try this again.
perfect.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for bearing with me, everyone. All right, so I just wanted to give you guys a fundamental course on redistricting by giving some shared vocabulary that we're going to hear during this legislative session, talking over some of the background of the 2021 redistricting, the current challenges, a little bit of the legal landscape that we find ourselves in as we go through this redistricting, and finally some takeaways for this session, moving into our next part of the presentation. So redistricting vocabulary. These are going to be terms that we hear a lot during this session if it continues. So want to make sure that we have this foundational language slash for folks that have been in the game for a little while, a little refresher course on exactly what things mean. So cracking is the breaking up of communities, generally communities of color, to dilute their political power in a district. There's also packing, which is drawing lines to intentionally put communities in one district to limit how much influence they have in other districts. And I'll have a little image to kind of illustrate what that looks like on the next slide. There are communities of interest. Now, this is a group of people with shared concerns, interests, and characteristics, and they include racial and ethnic groups as well. And coalition district. This is a district that is drawn to include multiple minority communities of interest that don't have the numbers to vote in candidates of each group's choice on their own, but that vote in a coalition to vote the same candidate of choice. And this was a legal theory that was recognized in the Fifth Circuit until recently, which we'll go over a little bit later. But just to drive home what this looks like in practice, you can have you can have the exact same population distribution, right? But through the mechanisms of cracking and packing, you can have very different outcomes in representation. And we see this brought home in how Texas has redistricted in the past. As from a practical perspective, if you're used to having a Democrat and a person of color representing you in Houston or DFW or the Valley, they might put a person with that representation in a majority white district, where the existing congressperson has an existing incumbent base that they are trying to appease, and then may not listen as much to your community concerns as someone from a particular community of interest. So that's how that can kind of play out in real life. All right, a little bit more vocab, and then we'll get into the history here. So what racial gerrymandering is when race predominates in the legislature's considerations when they're drawing a district map, right? So race was their predominant consideration when they were drawing a map. Partisan gerrymandering is when maps are drawn solely for partisan advantage, right? They are trying to make it so that their side has the best chance in each individual election. Vote dilution is a claim under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which protects equal access to elections, and that the redistricting reduced the opportunity of voters of color to elect the candidate of their choice compared with the majority group's voters. So essentially, as we saw in the previous image, using mechanisms to dilute the voting power of minority communities through drawing district lines. Then we have intentional discrimination, which is a high bar, but it's a government actor intentionally discriminated against a minority group when enacting a law or a map such that it violates the US Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. And we'll go into what that looks like a little later. Okay, so we've been here before. Very recently, 2021, we had a redistricting session. After the US Census, every 10 years, Texas is mandated under both the US Constitution and the Texas Constitution to redraw its maps to take into account population growth and redistribution in the state. This isn't inherently a bad thing. Texas has to do this in order to comply with the one person, one vote rule, that districts need to have as similar populations as possible to take into account changes in population, et cetera. The problems come when shenanigans ensue in different interests trying to advance their own agenda. So in 2020, the US Census results were delayed partially due to the pandemic and partially due to unsuccessful attempts to add a citizenship question to the census. But due to our population growth, Texas was due to gain 2 congressional districts in the 2021 redistricting cycle. And as we saw from those census results, overwhelmingly, 95% of Texas population growth was among communities of color. And you would expect that with that kind of growth and distribution, that growth would be reflected in the congressional districts and our state legislative districts in the final maps. So here, just a little bit of a breakdown that we can see that Hispanic folks had the greatest growth in terms of raw numbers, but that the Black and Asian communities also had really exponential growth in terms of percentage of increase. Now, despite this immense growth among communities of color across the state, the legislature drew maps that deprive many individuals of color the opportunity to elect the candidates of their choice. So in 2021, civil rights groups and the Department of Justice brought lawsuits to invalidate the maps under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act on the grounds of vote dilution, and that they impermissibly drew those maps to deprive communities of color fair representation. And some of those groups also brought claims of intentional gerrymandering and racial gerrymandering in violation of the 14th Amendment. Now, Texas, as its defense, has claimed that it drew the maps race blind, meaning that they claim that they only drew the maps to advance their partisan aims and not to advance any other agenda. Now it's time for a crash course on the legal landscape and how we got where we are. So these are the foundations of how maps are analyzed now under the Voting Rights Act and under the Constitution because of both Supreme Court precedent and the Fifth Circuit to kind of show you how we have to think about maps these days. So the first case is Shelby County v. Holder, and this invalidated the pre-clearance formula in the Voting Rights Act that subjected certain states to government oversight when they passed election laws and redistricting maps. What does that mean? Essentially, there used to be a formula in the Voting Rights Act that captured states with a history of discriminating against people of color and marginalized groups. And the Voting Rights Act instituted a method whereby any law or redistricting map that was passed had to undergo federal government review to make sure that it did not disempower communities of color. After 2013, we saw many voting rights laws and discriminatory maps enacted that would have been invalidated under the pre-clearance standard. Next case is Rucho v. Common Cause, and this case found that partisan gerrymandering is a non-justiciable political question, meaning that the federal courts have decided that the only remedy for rigging the political process in one party's favor is the political process. So it's a bit of a catch-22 on that particular front. Next case is Alexander v. South Carolina, NAACP in 2024. And this case found that when partisanship is closely correlated with how a minority group votes in a racial gerrymandering claim, the challengers have to provide evidence that partisanship does not by itself explain the resulting map, and providing an alternative map is crucial to proving that. So what do I mean by that? What the court is saying there is that you need to be able to, as the person challenging the map, show that that the people drawing the map could have achieved the exact same partisan split that they were going for in that district without disempowering communities of color, right? In order to prevail on the racial gerrymandering claim, theory being that that's the only way to show that that race was the predominant consideration, which really narrows those types of claims. Doesn't make it impossible by any means, but it does narrow the claim. And finally, in the Fifth Circuit, we have Pitaway v. Galveston County, and this overruled precedent that that VRA's Section 2 protects coalition districts, which I talked about a little bit earlier, where previously the Fifth Circuit had recognized that minority groups can vote in coalition to elect the candidates of their choice. That has now been invalidated in the Fifth Circuit, but the case is ongoing in the district court on other claims. All right, so back to the present. How does this affect our 2025 redistricting? So in March of 2025, the Department of Justice withdrew its claims in the current Texas redistricting lawsuit, meaning that it's only the civil rights groups that are now involved in that litigation since the Trump administration withdrew. On July 7th of this month, DOJ sent a letter to state leadership claiming that because coalition districts aren't protected after Pitaway, 3 existing Black Latino coalition congressional districts and 1 majority Latino district are considered unconstitutional racial gerrymanders. On July 9th, 2025, the governor called a special session in light of those constitutional concerns raised in the DOJ letter, meaning that they are saying that they have to remedy that particular racial gerrymander that the DOJ claims is present. So, few takeaways I want to take away from everything that I just said. Coalition districts are not illegal under the VRA just because the DOJ is saying that. They are simply not required by the VRA. As Stephanie said earlier in this presentation, Fair Maps Coalition has sent state leaders a letter outlining that the state cannot have it both ways, i.e. they can't redraw maps for what they say is impermissible racial considerations when drawing the maps, while simultaneously claiming that they drew the maps race blind without considering race at all. There is no other legal reason to do a mid-decade redistricting. It is unjust and improper to redraw the maps while there is still ongoing litigation to determine whether those maps violated federal law. And rushing through this process in 30 days without regional hearings, as Steph outlined, and using 2020 data, which I will point out, it has been 5 years since that data was first published. Populations change every month, let alone every year. But using that will not result in fair maps with proper consideration for community interests, since it's not collecting that community input that we would expect to see from a fair redistricting process. Okay, so what districts were outlined in the DOJ letter? We have 4 primarily in the Houston and DFW areas. There are 3 Black Latino coalition districts, as well as 1 majority Hispanic district. And I'll just point out that whenever legislators redraw maps, inherently there is kind of a cascading ripple effect, right? It's really hard to just draw a district that only affects the district that you are trying to change. It will inherently change the composition of surrounding districts, and that can kind of ripple out. So just something to consider. In addition to these identified districts in the DOJ letter, President Trump has said in recent communications that he expects to see 5 new districts with a Republican majority come out of this redistricting. And he has identified, and people close to him, other districts that may be in play in terms of what they will target to target communities of color in this particular redistricting. These districts are predominantly in the RGV up to San Antonio, the DFW area, and South Texas generally, plus Houston and Austin districts that may be identified at a later date. But the situation is evolving and ongoing, so we'll see how it goes. All right, a few takeaways from everything that I've just said. This mid-decade redistricting is unjust and it's out of order, but it continues our state government's unfortunate history of trying to disempower the voices of communities of color. And the pretext for this redistricting that was outlined in the DOJ's letter is based on an inaccurate and misleading reading of the law, and it shouldn't be encouraged. And redistricting now is particularly improper when there is pending litigation regarding the legality of the current maps. And the state is trying to have it both ways. They are trying to launder racial gerrymandering under the guise of partisan gerrymandering, and we have to make it clear on the public record. Inherently, what they're trying to do is say we are redrawing the maps solely for partisan advantage, but what they're actually doing is disempowering communities of color. And we need to make that as clear on the public record as we possibly can. And the best way to do that is through the testimony of community members and letting your lawmakers know that this is unacceptable. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleagues on the rest of the presentation.
Would you mind stopping the share?
Sure thing. Okay, there we go.
Oh, let me go back to the presentation. So just quickly, I wanted to add a few more comments in. So Texas has a horrible history, like I said at the beginning of the call, of discriminating against voters of color during the redistricting process. They have found to either have violated the Voting Rights Act or intentionally discriminated against voters of color for every decade since the passage of the Voting Rights Act in the 1960s. Again, the state's maps in 2021, there are multiple voting rights and civil rights groups that stepped in and filed suit. We do believe those maps already racially discriminate. We do believe that communities of color are being already shortchanged. And now the state is stepping in to take away more representation for communities of color. Just quickly, the tenacious defender was a quote from Thurgood Marshall while he was on the Supreme Court when he was talking about Texas, because this is not a one and done type thing. This is constant and reoccurring. So I just wanted to point that out really quick. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this briefly. Again, these are the implications of what this means, racial gerrymandering in Texas. So right now, the total population of the state is 60% people of color. But when you look at the makeup of our congressional delegation, the racial makeup of our congressional delegation, only 34% of our representatives are people of color. So this is not a fight about political parties. It is a fight about who has political power and who gets to wield it. Is Dave Jones on the call yet? I'm going to turn it over really quick to him. Dave's going to talk about some of the outcomes for gerrymandering and what this means for folks. Dave, are you here?
Yeah, I am. Thanks. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, just briefly, I mean, what everybody has been describing, what Veronica talked about, the result is that the general elections in a lot of situations, especially given the way that the legislature gerrymandered the districts in 2021, is that the general elections are barely competitive in a lot of districts. The fight goes to the party primaries, and they draw these safe districts, and incumbents either get reelected or sometimes they don't even have a challenger. There were several in the last 2024 election that didn't even have a challenger in the general election. It moves all of the issues toward those that are important to folks who vote in partisan primaries, and those tend to be more extreme partisans. They tend to have issues that they care about that might not be exactly the same as people generally, and so that's the really bottom line nefarious thing that happens because of these kinds of gerrymanders, and it really has the most severe impact on people who need more services, who need better government, and are not able to get the health care that they need, are not able to get a decent wage, and the things that you would hope a government is fighting for, but instead is talking about culture war issues and things that aren't necessarily the first thing that ordinary voters would think about. So that is the most significant issue. Stephanie, is there another slide that you have for me? Yeah.
I think next we're going to turn it over to Nikki.
Oh,
She
okay,
will
sorry.
go over some of the specifics, and then if you want to chime in at the end, because you were very well spoken on how this like the policy implications and how this affects everyday folks. If you have some follow-up thoughts, jump in after Nikki.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dave and Stephanie, and thank you, Veronica, for that. Oh, hi, can you hear me now? Thank you. Several years in and I can't unmute properly. Thanks everyone for being here tonight. I was just saying thank you, Stephanie, Dave, and Veronica for putting this together and for that great overview. So the reason why we care so much about racial gerrymandering and having communities of color represented is not just because we think it's important for, communities to be represented when it comes to seeing faces that look like them in Congress and in legislatures and in other bodies that make decisions, although that is important. The other reason why this is so incredibly important for our communities is that it has a real policy impact. There have been studies done over and over again tracking how redistricting is done in states like Texas, and when gerrymanders happen and they break up the voting power of communities of color, we see shifts in policy that are against what the overall attitudes of the electorate are. It happened in Texas after the 2003 redistricting. It happened after the 2011 redistricting, and it's been happening again after the redistricting in 2021. So the most clear example we've seen of this recently is that on the whole, Texans don't really support I don't want to call it the Big Beautiful Bill, although that's technically the name of it in the congressional record when you look it up. But the overall tax bill, the redistribution bill that was just passed and the president signed the 4th of July. For every major part of this bill, we've seen that Texans, like most Americans, they either don't postulate, either don't support it or they're actively against it. So just going into healthcare access, the majority of Texans, they actually wants to expand Medicaid access. In one of the bigger surveys from 2023 done by UT, 73% of Texas voters wanted to expand Medicaid. When you look at other polls, it's the same thing, and yet this bill does the opposite. In general, this bill goes against voters' preferences by redistributing wealth on a level that we haven't seen since Reconstruction when it comes from taking from poorer families, families who have less, and redistributing to the rich. Just in Texas, it's estimated that over 1.5 million Texans will face increased healthcare costs in a state that already has some of the lowest healthcare access in America, and 400,000 Texans will not have access to healthcare coverage. Same thing when it comes to other programs that Texans rely on to support their families and themselves. For SNAP, for food stamps programs, about 700,000 Texans will likely be knocked off now that there are additional reporting and work requirements for food stamps. According to the University of Pennsylvania and Yale, they did a study, and about 51,000 people will die each year additionally, in addition to the deaths we have from poverty already in Texas, due to the impacts of this bill. This bill essentially takes about $1,000 from the poorest 20% of US households and redistributes it to the wealthiest households who don't need that, so they can have 300,000 a year in tax breaks. And then, of course, another issue in Texas that is complicated, immigration. We don't have like really excellent polling on this, but on the whole, it does look that more Texans oppose than support the way immigration raids are being done now. Well, immigration is always reflective of different attitudes across parts of Texas as a whole. Texans are not supportive of the way immigration raids have been done, with mass ICE agents coming in, stopping people without due process, including people with no criminal records, people who have legal status here. This bill is going to give $150 billion to ICE so that they can continue to terrorize and raid immigrant communities. And all of these things are outcomes that Texans didn't want. I wanted to bring up a couple of other examples that aren't directly related to this bill as well, because I think it's just important to connect redistricting and like the issues. When it comes to, for example, having gun laws, again, controversial in Texas, but the Texas Politics Project found that overall, 44% of voters want stricter gun laws, 36% don't have an opinion or are okay with how things are, and 16% want less strict gun laws. So basically, the attitude we're facing are 16% of voters in Texas want easier access to guns. 44% want stricter access to guns. What happened in Texas after this poll was taken? Our state has actually made it easier to access guns by removing permit requirements. And our congressional delegation on the federal level consistently as overall opposes making gun access stricter. And in fact, when the last time there was a major mass shooting and Congress actually did something about it, when our Senator John Cornyn was a part of the effort to pass a bill to improve red flag laws and other smaller issues, not a huge overhaul, but still an improvement. There was a huge backlash within the right-leaning electorate because, and largely honestly white electorate, if we're being honest, there was a huge backlash against him, and he's now facing a primary challenger, partly based on that decision to support gun laws that a lot more Texans support than oppose. Another, actually, I didn't introduce myself, so maybe I should pause and do that for a bit. My name is Nikki Afizi. I'm the policy manager with Engage Texas. We're a chapter of a national Muslim American advocacy organization. We're dedicated to mobilizing and empowering Muslim American voters. And we are also part of the Asian American Pacific Islander table in Houston that focuses on voter engagement in AAPI communities as well. And we were a plaintiff in the redistricting lawsuit that Veronica talked about a while ago. One thing that we've also noticed in Texas, as people of color who work with other people of color and immigrant communities and as Muslims, is that we see a lot of hate speech and hate messaging from elected officials and from candidates in Texas, like more so than I think other states. And one reason is honestly gerrymandering. Because of the dynamics that Dave talked about. It makes political sense in a lot of cases for candidates to use racially charged language or even to just flat out target communities of color when they're running for office because they know there will be no repercussion and they will be rewarded electorally. And we saw this dynamic play into another issue, which is our rights to vote and whether our votes count. And it feels like so long ago, but just a few years ago in 2020, when Donald Trump lost his second bid for the White House, he, of course, wanted to make the case that he'd actually won. He pushed a lot of cases trying to overthrow the election results. In 60 plus court cases, the courts looked at it and said, no, there's nothing here. The election was fair and well conducted. It was secure. Texans as a whole there wasn't any clear support among Texas voters for Donald Trump doing that. Again, some voters had no feelings about it. Some voters supported it, some were opposed, but it was not a majority issue. And yet, our delegation, like our Texas congressional delegation, had a huge number of supporters who were trying to get into this narrative that the election was stolen, we need to overturn election results and get out the vote. And our state attorney general, Ken Paxton, was one of the big proponents of trying to overturn votes in other states. And he used our state resources as Texans to help push lawsuits that were trying to overturn the election. And part of what made this election conspiracy so dangerous for Texans as well is that it eventually turned into a narrative that combined with immigration narratives around fears of like immigrant communities who shouldn't be voting, minority voters shouldn't be voting. And it was used as further justification to push voter suppression bills. And a lot of us who work in the voting rights space, we saw that just last year, our state was going after primarily minority-led organizations that work on voter registration under the theory that we're helping illegal voting and allowing for voter fraud to happen. And all of these things were tied together, and it's possible for our state and our federal leaders from Texas to do this because they are in safely gerrymandered districts. And then the last few slides I have are just a reflection of how the vote record for the big beautiful bill, tax bill, whatever you want to call it, how that went. Again, this is going to have devastating impacts on Texans, especially Texans who rely on programs like SNAP, like Medicaid. And we see that not only was this a party line vote, it was a vote where we see the wider parts of the Texas congressional delegation pretty much supported this bill, and the representatives that come from communities of color and represent more diverse districts voted against it. I'm going to pass it back now to Dave to add in any comments about policy and gerrymandering.
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. I mean, I think that's very well done. I don't necessarily want to take any time to add very much more than that. I think you said it very well. It's just it's a situation where there's just too much power in the Republican and I mean it's really true in those districts that are Democratic as well that have been packed. It's the contest is in the primaries, and it just makes it so the problems that real Texans are most concerned about don't get addressed. So I don't have anything more to add than that.
Thank you both. You both did a really good job. Much better than I could have done, stumbling over slides. Okay, Lydia, you are going to step in and talk about an independent citizens redistricting commission and the reforms that we would like to see passed to kind of fix the mess that we're in. Our coalition space, again, is nonpartisan. We actually support reforms to fix the problems that we see today. We are not supporting counter gerrymandering by other states. Instead, we would like to focus on federal legislation that Lydia will be talking about, as well as state level reforms.
Hi, everybody. What I'm going to ask you to do is take your hands and shake them real hard, and let's get rid of some of this burden, because it's hard to hear all of this stuff again and again and again. So what I'm going to ask you to do is think about how can we stop the madness in a positive way. We need to speak up about what is happening now. But how do we stop the madness so it doesn't happen anymore? And that's where an independent citizens redistricting commission comes in. Next slide, please. We have two approaches. One is at the federal level with the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act that was presented back in 2021 as HR 4. And the purpose of that bill was to remedy the tearing down of the Voting Rights Act and make it viable again. The other one that would help at the federal level is the For the People Act. It was also presented in 2021. And guess what? They advocate in this bill establishing an independent citizens redistricting commission. Of course, these bills at the federal level address federal elections. And we want to know as Texans, okay, so where do we stand? How do we address those issues here in Texas? Next slide. So we have, as a coalition, presented several legislative pieces in the past legislative years to amend the Constitution to provide an alternative to the legislators drawing their own maps and putting it in the hands of citizens. It's a heavy lift in Texas, but we believe if we all work together, we can get it done. The resolution needs to pass with a 2/3 majority of both houses. The good news is the governor cannot veto it. And so once it passes the legislature, it goes to the people for a vote. So the second part of the movement is to get people to vote for it. The first part is to get people to support it. The second part is to vote for the amendment. Next slide, please. What would this commission look like? Very quickly, in other states, the state auditor is charged with the responsibility of getting the application process going. They've set up different number of people on the commission. This example has 14. And there is a screening process for removing potential partisan conflicts of interest. And so on the next slide, we're listing the potential conflicts of interest. So it would eliminate state or federal candidates or elected officials, members of their staff, family members and consultants, lobbyists, political party leadership, and there is a opportunity to eliminate donors of a certain amount of money. In this example, it's $2,000, but it can be something that can be negotiated. Next slide, please. Then the pool that is left is to be reviewed by the state, the legislature party leadership, both the majority and minority leaders in each house. And they're given the opportunity to strike up to 2 applicants from each sub-pool. So you end up eliminating around 4 further from the pool. Next slide. And then the official charged with the responsibility of doing all of this review of the people and all of this randomly selects, draw out of the hat, have a bingo ball going or whatever you want, and select 8 names from the remaining pools. In this example, it's 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and 2 people who identify as neither Democrat nor Republican. And they, in turn, select the final 6 commissioners to serve with them on that commission. We're not going to go into then what are they charged to do, because that would take real thinking, because we need to include now all of the buts that have been put up by court decisions into the legislation, and we're not at that stage yet. So next slide. Do I have one more? Yes. Who we are. We're Texans Against Gerrymandering. We have been working on this since 2017, and by this I mean a constitutional amendment. You're welcome to join us anytime you want, because the question that we're asking you is, how much longer do you want to wait to be heard before doing something about it that is not reactive to the latest push from whoever, but is proactive? So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Lydia, for sharing with us. I appreciate it. You're so quick and you went through the slides very efficiently, so thank you. I've got 2 more slides really quickly. So we want to leave folks with an idea. Before we get to the town hall portion, we want to give folks an idea of what might be useful to include in your testimony if we are given the chance to provide testimony to the legislator. So we definitely want you have to introduce yourself. If you feel comfortable, please include the name of your community that you live in. This will help to improve something called your community of interest. A community of interest is a legal term, but it's important for the legislator to know where your community is basically and what policies are impacting your community right now. So all you have to do is say, I live in wherever. I live on the south side of Austin, for example, and these are the issues that my community are concerned about, and this is what's impacting me and my family right now. So you could talk about stuff, and I've just listed some examples that Nikki mentioned earlier, but the tax bill that just passed, some questions to think about is your healthcare access, your access to healthcare coverage going to be jeopardized by the tax bill? Are you going to lose Medicaid or Medicare? Are you going to be able to put food on the table? Maybe you're receiving SNAP benefits, and now there's a good likelihood that you're not going to be receiving full benefits anymore. Maybe you live close to communities that have immigrants. This heavy policing of immigrant communities, while it hasn't occurred as much as it is in California, it does have an impact on the entire community nonetheless. I know that folks are afraid to send their kids to school right now. They're afraid to seek medical care. They're afraid to call for help in case of an emergency. That makes our entire community less safe. That is something to talk about if you feel comfortable talking about that to the committees. You could talk about the DOGE cuts, and I'm not going to go through all the DOGE cuts. There's a bunch of them, but you can definitely talk about the DOGE cuts. I know my mom is very upset and worried about her Social Security on a daily basis. That's what I hear from her. And disaster recovery is very big right now in the state, all across the state. I know in Houston, they're still recovering from numerous hurricanes, tropical storms, floods, you name it. They're still rebuilding, still recovering. That seems to be like an ongoing, constant problem for a lot of folks in the Houston area. And again, out here in Clark County, they're still recovering from the flood. So that is something else to talk about, and your concerns about FEMA being cut. Okay, the next we're going to jump to the town hall because we really want to start hearing from folks in the community and hear your concerns and hear what you might be thinking that you want to share for testimony. I do have to put a disclaimer though, because we're about to turn it over to the public and I can't control what everyone says. We just want to put a disclaimer up that this town hall is open to broad members of the community. Community opinions expressed by participants are their own and are not necessarily endorsed by the Fair Maps Texas Coalition or any of the organizations in the coalition. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm trying to figure out a good way to handle the town hall. If you want to speak, would you please just raise your hand and we will go by whoever raises their hand first and form a queue that way.
Hello, I have a question. So I guess this is more leaning towards the legal aspect of everything. If we've already filed a lawsuit, just lawsuits against gerrymandering and showing that they are disenfranchising the minority communities, what because that was one of the things that I've been thinking about is filing a class action lawsuit against Texas. But if it's already being done and he's still doing it while an active lawsuit is going on, I mean, I don't know. It just feels like kind of like what's the purpose?
So you're right, and that's why we're speaking out against it. One of our asks that I've included in our messaging guide that will be emailed out to folks at the end of the call. That's one of our messaging points. It's not fair for the state to hold up the maps in court and be able to pass unconstitutional maps and just continuously adopt new maps that don't meet constitutional muster, basically. They're trying to get out of judicial review, basically, if that makes sense. So we completely agree with you. And I know there are a lot of brilliant legal minds that are included on some of that litigation, and they are trying to stop the state from doing this mid-census redistricting through the courts.
Okay, because yeah, it just when I was looking at the slides and she was doing the breakdown on that, I was like, well, they're doing something that they're not because I was always under the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, that if there is a current lawsuit, you're not supposed to be making a move on anything while it's ongoing. So I don't know. That was crazy to me. I didn't even know that was filed in 2024. Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Let me just chip in and say, Rivian, you're not related to me, but I think you might be a brilliant legal mind also, because it doesn't make any sense to a lot of people. It interferes with the jurisdiction of the court, and there's no reason for it. But that's what they're doing, and that's where we're at.
And
Veronica is a real brilliant legal mind. I'll turn it over to her.
Thanks, appreciate it. I don't know if I've earned that title, but I do my best. So yeah, I mean, it is unjust and unfair, and in a lot of the time, state actors will generally not hold off on action that affects pending litigation. Unfortunately, that is not the case right now. They are just pushing forward with this call, and we have pointed out to them the injustice of doing so, and we will continue pointing that out. This is outrageous, and they are pushing for maps that should not be going into effect. Also, just want to point out that any newly adopted map could moot the ongoing lawsuit, but then those claims could also be amended and updated, and new lawsuits can also be filed to challenge the new maps. So it's not the end of the story, even though they are going through this improper course of action. And just to answer,
Veronica,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Just
Yeah,
quick
no
question,
worries.
because before you pass this portion, I do want to circle back really quickly. You
Mhm.
said that if a new lawsuit was to be filed, you said that may hold them up. Am I correct on that?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat your question? I just want to
I'm
make sure
sorry.
I heard you right.
So I think you mentioned, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. That's why I have to circle back. Sorry, a little ADHD going on here. Um,
Good.
if um if if a new lawsuit is filed, will that be able to stop this process? Or if they're ignoring the one that was filed in 2024, they would ignore a new one that's filed by a different
So,
party. Let me say that.
and if a new, so essentially, if a new map is drawn as a result of this special session, then lawyers can ask for that map not to go into effect. It may not be
Okay.
likely to succeed, so we shouldn't hold our breath on that. But if there is a new map, the new challenges can be filed to challenge that map to keep it from going into effect, hopefully. So I hope that answers your question.
It did. It definitely did. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, no problem at all. And I don't want to monopolize the call. So for sure, let's go to the next person.
Iro, I think you're next.
Hello, hi. My name is Ero, and I'm in the Dallas area. Thank you guys for hosting this session. This has been very informational. My question is more related to having conversations with our current legislators that are against this policy or against this being the redistricting happening, and encouraging them to not to pretty much to break quorum, so that it prevents the vote from happening and delays it. Because if a vote goes through, it's not going to it's not going to work in our favor. They're going to pass it because they have that majority both in the House and in the Senate. And we've seen in this past session how much power they've been able to amass this year and use it against us. So what is your organization stands on having that conversation and encouraging and maybe even putting a little pressure on them to not allow state to have quorum to even have this vote?
I think that's a difficult question to answer because of the changes the state has implemented since Democrats last broke quorum. I can't speak on behalf of the coalition members here, first of all. They're all their own organizations with their own viewpoints. So I can't really speak to that, but I do know that the state has put new restrictions on lawmakers who do decide to break quorum and leave the state. Those individual members will now have to pay, I think, up to $15,000 out of their own personal money if they do decide to break quorum. That'll be like a fee that the state will wage against them, and they cannot use it from their campaign funds. So that, to me, signifies that you're going to have some pretty significant individual wealth if you want to break quorum and try that. I don't know if lawmakers are planning to do that. I don't know if our coalition can say on the record if we support that or not. We do understand that the legislator is responsible for drawing the maps. We just think that it should only be done once every decade, or when the court deems it necessary, basically.
One other consideration with breaking quorum, just for folks' edification, because I don't think that this is general public knowledge, is that legislators are not paid very much for just being legislators, right? They generally have to have careers or are retired and have enough money or enough flexibility to be able to legislate on the legislative cycle. So breaking quorum also means, one, they have to physically leave the state. Two, they have to be able to support themselves while leaving the state. And three, they have to have the resources at their disposal to potentially move or avoid detection for as long as the quorum break is in place from at least state authorities. So they can't come back to the state without potentially being pursued by state authorities as well. So just to contextualize fully like what a quorum break means, I thought that might be helpful.
I could add to that as well. In addition to those considerations, the governor also still has the power to keep calling special sessions if there is a quorum break for this one. So and again, we don't have a position on it, but if you as an individual are thinking about advocating for a quorum break or want to talk to your legislators about that, one thing to keep in mind is ask for like one quorum break, or will it be a repeat? It's also, correct me if I'm wrong, the better attorneys on this call, but it is also within the state's power to like move primary dates if they need to. So if depending on how things go, it is actually a possibility that our state government would keep calling special sessions and then move the election dates next year to try to push through redistricting if it's something they really want to get done.
Historically, with both redistricting and with SB1 previous items. The last time that the minority party broke quorum, Governor Abbott did just that. He called successive back-to-back special sessions until a quorum was achieved again. So I think that would be a reasonable expectation if another quorum break was to happen.
I think that really puts into perspective, you guys. And we don't know what's going to happen, right? All of this is very sad to me, though. We don't know what's going to happen. I don't want folks to get depressed after this call. That's why I have John Lewis at the very beginning, reminding folks this is a very long fight. This is a very long fight. We have to hold on tight. We understand that rights are being taken away from us currently, but we have to look at the length of how long these fights have taken so far. We have to keep fighting. We have to keep raising our voice. We have to keep showing up. Okay, Julie, you're next. How are you? Oh, where'd you go? There you are.
All right. Thank y'all so much. It does seem early for us to get together. I'm in Corpus Christi, Texas. We're in District 27 right now, which we would love to get out of, but not because of gerrymandering. So that's our first problem here in South Texas. I think there's been a lot of attention on it happening in Dallas and Houston. And my experience in Texas as a retired labor organizer has been that this part of Texas gets left out of like things. And I hope we have ways that this coalition can help us more, because one problem is going to be like for Corpus Christi is probably be better for us to be our community of interest really is it really is what would be 34, because that's where we were before in 2010. It would work out much better for us, but mobilizing people about what's going to happen is a challenge because of that. The other challenge I want to bring up is that while we've been waiting to go forward, I've been recommending to folks that we ask for virtual testimony, because people from the Valley and Corpus Christi, we're not going to be able to get to Austin. And I guarantee you there's going to be a storm that hits the Gulf Coast sometime in the next couple of weeks. And we already know one could hit Houston soon, and that will impede it. So we've been asking for that to happen. I haven't heard a lot of talk about how important that is. I've loved this coalition because we work together and you give us lots of direction. So that's the beginning. I don't have a lot more except for we're in the fight with you all.
We're there with you too.
I think that
we're all Texas.
I firmly believe that South Texas is going to be the major chess piece in this shit. And we should be able to move it correctly.
I just want to uplift one thing that was put in the comments, which is that exactly right. Like we are a very big state, and it's very hard for folks that are not around Austin to, do what I do and live in the Capitol during legislative session, right? It's just not realistic or a fair expectation. One thing that we are happy to do is help coordinate writing out testimony if you'd like that written out, and we can have volunteers deliver that testimony. Another alternative is that, at least on the House side, the Senate hasn't implemented this for reasons best known to the Senate, but on the House side, there is public commentary available online. You can submit it from anywhere in the state when and if there is a hearing to make sure that your voice is heard on that record at least. So those are a couple of options, and please keep us informed and in mind as you look at the best ways to inform folks about how this is going to affect your community.
I think right now, if I could make a recommendation, is for everyone to hold on tight, but prepare for the worst. So we know that the governor has added redistricting to the special session. We don't want to legitimize this process. We don't want to start coming out and saying we want field hearings, because we don't want them to redistrict. We want the court and the litigation to run its course. So when the governor does announce the start of committee hearings and stuff like that, we will be sending more letters for sure and being more vocal in the process. But as of right now, we don't want to legitimize what they're trying to do. We don't think it's fair. We don't think it's ethical. We don't think it's right. But please, so at this point, we do want folks to start sharing in the community that redistricting is going on. We need your help. We need you to speak up. We need you to prepare in case there is that moment for us to participate. And then we also, please, we will be sharing out more letters for folks to sign on to about, like, if they do decide to hold hearings, we'll ask for virtual hearings so folks from across the state can participate. Okay, I'm going to go to the person I saw who had their hand up next. I think that was Jack.
Thank you, Stephanie. So I just want to ask, since I'm in CD 18 and one of the 4 districts that was identified in the DOJ letter. And so I was curious if you think there's any legitimate claim that the DOJ had in that letter as far as packing, or if it was just using Petaway as a ruse to get rid of the opportunity districts, and how you kind of differentiate between packing versus opportunity districts.
That district is the home of Barbara Jordan. That district was created in the 1960s. It's been changed for sure over the years, but that district is a historical district and has significant meaning for communities that live on the north and east sides of Houston. I was in that district when I lived in Houston when I was a little girl. And I remember Sheila Jackson Lee coming to my elementary school. That community and that district, I definitely think the DOJ is behind this, and they're using the Petaway case. So the lawyers from the Petaway case, their legal counsel was called PILF. I can't remember what that acronym stands for. Veronica, do you remember what the name for PILF? Public Entrance Legal Foundation, I think. So those lawyers, one of them, their senior legal counsel, was appointed to the Department of Justice just a few weeks ago, and she is now the senior voting rights attorney for the DOJ. She is a person behind the letter, and she is also very well aware of their litigation in Galveston. They also tried to dismantle a coalition district in Tarrant County recently, and they've done a mid-census redistricting there. And now voting rights and community organizations have stepped in to file litigation over that. So there's no doubt about it, 100%. This is the DOJ and PILF trying to dismantle existing historical districts that have elected candidates of choice. They have purposely started to erode more of the Voting Rights Act in Section 2. And now they're coming for districts that have, like I've been saying, historically elected candidates of choice for many, many years. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. So thanks for the background as well.
I'll go to the next.
Sarah had her hand up.
Yeah, Sarah, do you want to go next?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. So I'm in District 21, and my background is in public health. But my husband and I are actually pasture poultry farmers. We serve Austin restaurants and farmers markets. And one of our greatest concerns with the budget bill that passed was gutting of SNAP. We have customers that use Texas double up bucks, so SNAP and WIC funds. We're just really concerned about food insecure families, not just in our district, but statewide. Because we live in proximity to Austin, I'm certainly happy to go to the Capitol and speak or read somebody else's letter. Like if they couldn't make it up from Corpus Christi, totally understandable. So just wanted to offer, I'm fairly new to the League of Women Voters. I came on board last fall to register voters. But yeah, so just wanted to offer a lending hand.
Thank you. Lori,
I-
you had
Oh,
your hand
sorry.
up.
Just wanted to say greatly appreciate the offer from someone who goes to the Capitol all the time. Hearing from you guys it's what legislators need to hear more than from me.
Lori, did you want to go next?
Yes. I'm just wondering where you are getting your boots on the ground from. I know that I'm a member of the National Council of Jewish Women in San Antonio, and there may be others on the call, but I'm not really sure how I got on your mailing list. But I'm glad that I have. So how are you getting this coalition? How is it being populated?
So the nonprofit groups had an existing list. We also have most of our contact list from our website. National Council for Jewish Women, though, were plaintiffs, co-plaintiffs on our statewide litigation claim under Karen Edelston.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
the person that we were working with. So there's a
Of
good,
blessed memory.
yes. So she
Oh.
might have added a bunch of folks.
Oh no, and that's great. That helps me because but not only that, I'm really asking because I want to know, who are we looking to like I know that we will get the word out within our organization. Is that what you're counting on? Is that each of us take this back to different our organizations for this to help, man the fight,
Very much so, yes. And
woman the fight?
very much so. And we're also very much interested in, like I've been saying, to expand the coalition space and make it more of a rainbow coalition, like
Yeah.
Jesse Jackson and MLK worked to create during the civil rights era. So that is one of our main goals. So as many voices that we can include, as many chairs to the table that we need to make, we're very much willing and open to do that.
I would add that, I mean, one of the things we've talked about is trying to ask folks to work in their local areas, to contact the political leadership that's in their area, that, maybe it's municipal leaders, county commissioners, people in other levels of government below the federal level that are going to have an interest in whatever happens, however they draw these lines. And those folks end up having sometimes they can provide really powerful testimony if there's an opportunity to do that, but they also can be heard, maybe better than some of us who are just ordinary citizens. I mean, I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's one of the things that happens. So it is a way to, I mean, we'll have lots of other things that we can ask you to do individually, but that's something we sure want to mention.
Is Kanae Turner by any chance still on the call? It might have gone too long and she might have had to have jumped. Kanae, are you still around? No. How about maybe Pastor Deb from Houston? No. I had some folks lined up ahead of time to speak. Kanae is with the Barbara Jordan Institute. She was also a plaintiff on our statewide litigation. We withdrew our statewide litigation in March. Our claim was heavily based on coalition districts. So after the Fifth Circuit's decision to destroy and dismantle coalition districts, we had to withdraw our claim. I know Kanae was also involved in last decade's redistricting litigation, though, and she had agreed to speak. Pastor Deb also lives in the Houston area. She's on the north side of Houston, and she's heavily involved in her community. But I see she's not here anymore. So would anyone else like to speak on your community, on behalf of your community, or discuss the issues that you might be working on?
Or any questions?
Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, I have to keep my camera off because my internet is unstable. I'm the Congressional Justice Organizer and acting director for Texas Street, and We have worked with Texas Civil Rights Projects on several issues, but we do mobilize our people to show up at the Capitol to testify, as well as from all nations about Texas. And we organize the folks issue as well, voting rights and
Michelle, your internet unfortunately has given out, I think, is not cooperating. I heard that you were with the Texas UU Ministry. Is that social justice ministry, I think is what we've heard, and that you guys work on voting rights. I know you guys work on a whole multitude of issues. We've worked with you guys before for the Poor People's Campaign. At any rate, I'm sorry you're not coming through. Please, if you have the ability to drop something in the chat, we would appreciate it. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments? Thanks, Leland.
I have a
You, by the way.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Claudia.
The question I have is that even with the one you said they have a lawsuit already against the state of Texas for the redistricting in 2024, and it goes to when it goes to court, who decides on that? I mean, because it seems like the state of Texas just ignoring the request of the people. So is it going to be a total Republican jury or what that decides against this for against this districting, or go to like a Supreme Court of state of Texas?
It's in front of a 3-panel judge. It's a federal court based in El Paso. There is one judge that was nominated by, I believe, Obama or another past Democratic president, and then 2 are conservative. We don't know. I will say, though, that one of the judges on that panel did originally find he was involved in the Galveston claim concerning coalition districts, and he originally did find evidence of racial discrimination in that case, although he didn't clearly state it in his findings and his ruling. He was very upset about the county and the process that they used there. He is on our panel as well for the statewide litigation. Kind of not sure how they're going to rule, though, so we just have to hold tight and see. I will state, though, that in my opinion, the evidence was pretty obvious that the state did violate Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. They should have created new majority minority districts based on population growth and all the other evidence that the parties presented in court. But like I said, we don't know how the judges are going to rule quite yet. That litigation wrapped up in June.
Okay, thank you.
Frederick, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, we worked. I'm from Beaumont, Texas, in Jefferson County, and then during the 2021 redistricting, we tried to get some traction in Jefferson County, but we just couldn't get enough interest in our county with the party to come around, and as it ended up, Jefferson County, which was at one time all Democrat, had one district, has been split twice. It's been split for the state representative, and it's also been split for the U.S. representative. But what I wanted to know, you said you had this program out in 2017, and this is the first I've heard of it. I'm sorry, we didn't get wind of it back then, and I'm gonna try to get it out whenever you send it to me. But the real thing I wanted to mention is that what the Supreme Court what Texas is trying to do, and I'm pretty sure somebody on the Supreme Court told them to do it, is that they're talking about how the 4 districts in Houston are racially gerrymandered because they included Hispanics with African Americans to get a minority district. But they never mentioned the fact that Texas's 2 additional districts are all due to the Hispanic community, and no Hispanic districts were created. Nobody's even talking about that. And it doesn't seem like Democrats are saying enough to make people wake up to what the real problem is. I know people like us are doing it, but it doesn't seem like we get on the media like we ought to be out there. The people that's got voices. Jasmine Crockett is one of the greatest spokesmen we got, and she's such a great spokesman, everybody's scared of her. That's why they didn't put her as the minority whip on the oversight committee, because they're scared of her. But that's another thought. I just wanted to put that out there. There should be 2 Hispanic districts, because that's who the 2 districts that Texas picked up came from, Hispanic population.
First of all, are you with Beverly Hatcher's group?
Yes, ma'am.
I gave a presentation to you guys back in 2021 on communities of interest. So I'm so glad that you're here, and it's nice to see you guys again. For the 2 new Latino districts, MALDEF and the other plaintiffs that have filed suit are asking for new majority Latino districts to be drawn. And that's the court case that we're talking about. We have to be careful when we talk about our districts that we currently have in the Houston area. We definitely want to uphold and keep the districts that we have for sure, and we don't want to be critical. If you want to be critical of your representative, I can't tell you what to do, but we just have to be careful of how we approach the way we talk about this, so we don't undermine any litigation or anything like that. We want to keep our representatives in the Houston area in place, and then we want to add more representation for communities of color as well. So communities of color are short representatives in the Houston and DFW areas. They should have more representatives right now. Latino, African American, for sure. Even the AAPI community. I think all of our various communities, their voices need to be uplifted, and that definitely needs to come out more. Is that not only is that litigation still going on, but we are owed more communities or more representation in the Houston area for sure.
You know, if you don't mind, I'll add one other thing, Mr. Fuller. It's just like I can understand people's frustration about this. People have been fighting this though for a long time. I mean, we're 4 years since the current maps were passed. A lot of that is due to changes that have been happening in the law at the Supreme Court level and a lot of different things. But there have been people fighting this all along. It's just that it's unfortunately the court process can be very slow under certain circumstances. So it is frustrating, but there are people trying to do the right thing, and they are continuing to fight. And I think it's up to the rest of us to do things beyond the courts to make it clear how unfair a lot of this is. And that's kind of why Fair Maps Texas really exists, is to organize ordinary people to stand up against this, because eventually, hopefully, it'll make a difference. But thank you for all your efforts.
I'd like to make an observation. I'm going to ask you to think about the progression. It started with book bans, and what kind of books were they banning? They were banning books about people who are different. And so it's a logical conclusion that they would try to do away with minority districts also. So to me, as a woman of color, as a almost 77-year-old, it's not a surprise. It's just the logical progression of events. They want to erase us. And when you take away our representation, we are erased, not just in books, but in schools and everywhere you go, right? So if you're worried about fairness, there's nothing fair about this. This is our history in Texas. And it's time that we recognize that, accept it as it is, and take proactive action to change it.
I want to get one more person to talk, and that's Kanae Turner. That's the person I mentioned earlier. Kanae, do you want to come off mute? Hey.
Yes. Hey, everyone. I'm sorry. I'm doing double duties tonight. I'm a board member for an Black Academy of Arts in Dallas, and so we're having an event. But yeah, thank you all for doing this and putting up the call. I know as an individual plaintiff from our last, from the 2021 lawsuit affected by Senate District 10 in Tarrant County. I did not, I knew we were, we had decided as a group to sign off to just let it be, but I did not think we'll be back this soon together. And especially, I did not think Tarrant County was going to take another hit so soon, but I'm not surprised because once Tarrant County mid-decade redistricting went through, I knew just it was a matter of time for Austin to do theirs. So I will say this as an individual that was part of the architect of CD 33, was working with that campaign. Working when that district first was created, which was initially supposed to be two opportunity districts, one for a Black seat, one for a Hispanic seat. But so they cracked it and packed it to one that had to be a share seat. And so that's been, oh my gosh, that's one that I've been part of. So coming on 13 years, now we're attacking this seat once again. And those same individuals that live in precinct 2 and 1 of Tarrant County Commissioner's Court are now having to threaten again representation when it comes to a congressional member. And so it is very disheartening, but we are not giving up. We are, voices will be heard, fighting and screaming because we deserve representation. Also on the other end, as an individual that works in Houston as well with the nonprofit Robert Jordan Leadership Institute, Barbara Jordan's seat is being attacked itself, and then a former resident of CD9, seeing these seats being already kind of losing, pretty cracked and packed even during 2021, and then turn around and saying, oh, now it's racially put together. Well, y'all designed it. So we will not go down. I know the people of CD18 has already gone about oh God, it's long, 6-8 months without representation already in Congress, because of this lack of putting a special election together. And now there's threatening for them to even get less representation. So people will not be silent. We are working with a lot of people on the ground and within this call to make sure individuals at least have preparation of emailing their representative And if they can make it to any, if there's a hearing, making sure that they can testify down in Austin. But if they cannot, because this is short notice, and these individuals that live in this community are working people, they cannot just up and leave and go down to Austin when they have bills to pay in which they have to work. And so we're going to make sure they at least voice their opinions to their elected officials, even if it is people that they did not vote for, and that including people of their surrounding district, not necessarily just their representatives, because a lot of times their representatives probably match are against this, are in opposition of this redistricting, but other people that are a part of the coalition, like the Houston coalition, the Dallas coalition, the Fort Worth coalition, making sure that they are aware that as constituents to them as well, that this is not okay. So I look forward to working with you all. We are also working with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund to making sure we have things for the record. So thank you once again, Stephanie, Lydia, Dave, for and everyone else with the Fair Maps for putting this together.
Thank you, Kane, for being here. I appreciate it. Okay, since we've gone way over on time, I think we'll close out with it. I am going to get on board or right after the call and send out slides to everyone, messaging packet. Just keep in mind the messaging packet is a first stab. We'd love to hear your feedback on it. Please feel free to email us at fairmapstexas@gmail.com with your input. And it'll be coming from the email I send out will be coming. You can just respond to that email address. But we'd love to hear your input and make updates and have it be more of a living document, living, breathing document, and get input from the public on it for sure. Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. We very much appreciate it. Very, very, very much appreciate it. All right. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Have a good night.